So today when I was on my way home from work, I saw a billboard that was on the side of the highway, and it was for a church, and it had a beautiful message on it that said, "Release the mental weight, become transformed." And this is something that I think probably the majority of people have to do, right? Because when we're aware of how the mind works and how it operates, so many of the blockages that we experience in life, that keep us from reaching the success that we want to accomplish can just be dwelling within the mind. We can have negative self-talk that sabotages us, belief systems, thought patterns, right? We could be too focused on the past. We could be too focused on the future. The mind could be telling us to give in to one of the 7 deadly sins, right? Pride, greed, wrath, gluttony, sloth, lust, envy. We got to make sure that our mind is calibrated to run as optimally as it can be, right? We got to think of it like a computer. Our body is the computer and our mind is the processor. But when we're downloading all this information and, even some viruses, right? Our computer's not going to be running at the best speed it can because there's too much clutter. We need to go in and see what's installed in it. And when certain things are not serving us well, if we have a virus or, malware, we got to remove it essentially, right? And so how do we do that when we're talking about the mind? One, we got to become aware. We got to see what the mind is doing exactly. And a great way to do this is by practicing some form of meditation. And you can just sit down, a few minutes at the beginning of the day, take deep breaths, and just observe your mind. Do this for like 15, 20 minutes. And you'll see when you're trying to sit still and be quiet, your mind might just start feeding you stuff, right? It's trying to pull up information, and you got to see essentially what's running. And maybe, your mind starts feeding you things about how you can go, accomplish things today, and that's great. But if you have like any kind of negative self-talk or any, patterns where you see it's thinking about old wounds and traumas, then, that's a problem. And so we have to address that. Maybe for traumas, we have to go to therapy. We need to talk to somebody. But, we can't be aware of that. Like, if we don't know there's a problem, we're not going to be aware and take the actions needed for the appropriate change, right? But, say we're talking negatively to ourselves, this is where, we talk about things like affirmations and things of that nature. And the brain is capable of neuroplasticity, which is a concept where it can change after you reinforce it with, the positive patterns, right? So, if I start talking to myself more positively, if I'm listening to podcasts and recordings that are, getting my mind right and putting some good information into my computer, it can naturally start deleting the old files that go against it, right? So you gotta, reinforce your mind with better content, right? That's another way we can fix our mind is by, listening to things that are going to uplift us. I know for me, a big part has been that, and I can express myself better and feel better and do better because I started feeding my mind better content. I began to recognize like how I've been thinking and what I've been thinking about has not really been serving me well. And so, once I started, looking into self-improvement, listening to, people that talk about mindset shifts and stuff like that, then I had the information that all I needed to do was essentially apply it, right? And I encourage you to do this for yourselves, and it's a journey. It might not, happen right away, but when you start taking the steps, that's where, the growth comes. You're not going to grow if you don't take any steps towards progress, right? So that's the main message that I wanted to get on here and say. One of my mentors, he said, beware of the ego, and when your mind is feeding you things that relate to the 7 deadly sins, like those can be your ego identifiers. So see when your mind is setting you astray by feeding into your ego, right? And if you can do that, if you can catch yourself when you're negatively, doubting yourself or putting yourself down and say, hey, this is not what I have to follow, right? I can be in control of my mind. And what is that? That's the spirit. That's your heart. You got to get in tune with your heart, not your mind, right? And once your mind starts feeding you better stuff, then you can, follow it and move forward, right? But until then, if you're working through any of these, carrying the mental weight, then get in tune with your heart, get in tune with your spirit, get in tune with better information, better thought patterns, and you'll see once you release that mental weight, you're gonna move a lot further along in life and get to where you want to be. So with that being said, I hope you all have a great day. I hope you keep turning up. I hope you keep self-improving, working to be the best version of yourself every single day, and let go of the mental weight. All right, my full love to you guys. Let's lock in with love, and until next time, we'll talk soon.